Forbidding the speaking of tongues is not something that a Christian should engage in. According to 1 Corinthians 14:39, forbidding the speaking in tongues is not something that we should do. However, that being said, the Apostle Paul, in laying out the rules for church behavior, said that speaking in tongues is not something that we can do in the church unless there's an interpreter who's present who can bring forth what the message of the tongues is being for the edification of the community. And the Apostle Paul gave good reason for this in his explanation in setting forth the rules for church behavior in his epistle to the Corinthians. He said, look, if an unbeliever comes and enters into your midst and looks at you and you're all going, look, they're going to think you're all crazy. They're going to think you're all insane. And so there has to be an interpreter present who can make some sense out of the message that God has given to his community through the gift of tongues, if it's really, really real. If it's not real and we're just doing it for show, you ought to cut it out. God doesn't give his spiritual gifts so that we can bring glory to ourselves, so that we can bring attention to ourselves, so that we can be popular in the eyes of the church or in the eyes of those who are around us. God gives his spiritual gifts for the edification of his community, for the betterment of his community, for building up the church of God, for establishing the truth of the Christian faith. The scriptures are clear that the gifts and the powers of God are irrevocable. Therefore, we should continue to listen to the command of Scripture and recognize that the gifts of Scripture are still in effect today, because as the Scripture says, the gifts and the powers of God are irrevocable. They will not be taken away from the church as long as there is a church. That being said, if there's not an interpreter present, the Apostle Paul is very clear. Speaking in tongues is not going to be allowed in the church. If you got to do it in your home, do it in your home. If you're going to be edified by yourself, be edified by yourself. But don't make a mockery of the gospel. Don't make a mockery of Jesus. Don't make a mockery of God. Don't make yourself out to be a fool in front of the unbelieving community. Don't throw your pearls before swine. Jesus doesn't want us to do that. Jesus doesn't want us to use our gifts for our own glory. We have these spiritual gifts, if we have them, for the glory of God. I don't have the gift of tongues myself. But for those who do, if it's real, don't use it for the glory of yourself. Use it for the glory of God. If you find an interpreter, great. Bring your messages to the church. That's wonderful. It's awe-inspiring when it's real. But when it's for your own personal gain, just don't bring that foolishness on God.